Yeah, so, okay, you can start whenever you're ready.
All right, so we're good now. Okay. Thank you all for joining. We have on our agenda uh, discussion of graduation requirements, literacy, math, AI, and then a proposal from Representative Goulet on legacy admissions. We'll go ahead and start with the legacy admissions so that Representative Goulet can leave if he would like.
All right, I'll share my.
And so,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, if you would go ahead and let us know what the uh, ask is, if you could give some background on the proposed legislation and resolution.
So I'm going to share my screen right now. It's still disabled. Can someone enable screen sharing?
Yeah.
Okay, can you all see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this issue is on legacy admissions, making sure we try to further diversity in wake of the Supreme Court's decision, which I frankly think is really abhorrent that we're not considering types of affirmative action preferences we used to provide. And if we're not doing that, we certainly should not be providing preference for people who already have an advantage. And those would be folks that frankly are graduates of those universities, previous graduates, or high donors of those educational institutions. I think that does really frankly the opposite, which is giving everyone a fair opportunity to get into college based on merit. So we had really compelling testimony before the State Board of Education at our public meeting on this issue. There's a draft bill right now that's been circulating around. I've got it up on the screen right here. I think we should craft a resolution based on this bill, not directly supporting the bill for a couple of reasons. One, it's a draft, and then two, it could change through the council's process, but supporting an end to legacy preference here at colleges in DC. Now, I'll go through the bill briefly here and then take questions on it. The bill specifically does exempt, there was discussion about this. It does exempt historically Black colleges and universities from the mandate. I think I have mixed feelings about that issue. It would be for the committee ultimately to take up to decide whether they would include that exception. I do feel like that is kind of, again, creating an advantage for some students and not others. I think at those universities, having a graduate preference of parents does not necessarily increase the diversity of students at those schools. It would just merely give an advantage to some students and not others that's not based on merit. But that would be an issue for the committee to take up. You note the exception is in here in E, and that did get some significant discussion at the working session. But this really just is an issue I think we should get in front of and get on board with, given the Supreme Court's ruling. I think in DC, we want to ensure that our students, some of which have never had parents who've gone to college or a university, have a fair opportunity to compete. And I think affirmative action used to give us that path. And without that, we need to take down barriers that really provide an advantage for students who are already in these universities as legacy students. So I think I would ask the committee to take this issue up. I think we have a draft here that the staff could quickly turn into a resolution. If you'd like, I'd be glad to do the work on that now that we know the process from Kathleen. And I'm really just happy to take any questions on it. I think the issue is pretty self-explanatory, but just feel free to ask me any questions. And I've circulated this draft around to all the members of the committee.
Go ahead, Representative Patterson.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an issue that I've been watching from its infancy for quite some time, for about a year or two now. College Track was pushing it. I went to a meeting at Friendship, and then I also saw some things from DFER, of course. on this particular issue. It is an issue that I support in a sense. I'm a first generation college student, graduate, everything like that. I know what that meant, but I also in that part about HBCUs and everything like that. I have feelings about that as well. My daughter went to an HBCU. She went to Spelman. I did not go to Spelman or anything like that, or Morehouse is a company in school. But I know that they have a legacy process, and she could have been denied of getting there had her grades not been as great as they were. Um, I'm more in the apt of supporting it if it levels the playing field across the board. I think we raise issues when we start saying, and this is a black man saying it amongst folks, when we carve out something specifically for African American schools. I can see that becoming a larger issue, because as you said, Representative Goulet, a level playing field as far as what you're applying for and things like that, those type of things. I just think that we need to have a level playing field. It is something that I'm very interested in. It is something that I do support. I think it needs to end. I think every student should be looked at as far as admissions on their merit. And I want to give every child, regardless of their race, ethnicity, lifestyle, or anything else, social economics, an opportunity to get into the school that they choose. And they should be able to have that opportunity without any barriers that are placed in their way. So I support this and look forward to hearing more about it.
Representative Patterson, just so I'm clear, you oppose the carve out for the HBCUs?
I actually do.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And I had asked when we had public comment about this, had asked about Georgetown's program for the descendants of the 282 242, sorry, enslaved people who were sold by Georgetown University, and I'm not seeing that I'm not seeing any reference to that in this, unless I'm missing it.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that would in any way imperil that great program. I mean, in a way, this helps because a lot of those students who are honored through that were not people who were legacy families of Georgetown or people who were high donors of Georgetown. It was actually in a way doing the opposite. It was honoring students, of the descendants of those individuals who helped fund Georgetown through the sale of, basically being sold into slavery, a horrendous act. This, in a way, was seeking to make it right. So I don't think, to your point, Representative Henderson, this in any way would imperil that program. In fact, I think it kind of supports some of the principles there that we want to give new students, an opportunity to succeed and thrive at these elite colleges and universities. And that's imperiled if there's a preference given to basically legacy students because their parents went to that school, or given to donors because their dad, or mom or family bought a building at the school that student then gets in over a more deserving student with better grades who overcame greater challenges. So I think to your point, this would not in any way imperil that great program. And if there's any sort of language you'd like to include in it, I'm glad to work with you on it. But I don't see how this would create a problem for that program, unless I'm missing something.
I would concur. Mr. Chair, on that as well. I have the book, the 272, and got to speak with Georgetown's chief of staff at a presentation about the 272 and everything. And I think this is more of a reparation as opposed to legacy when we're talking about the 272 and Georgetown trying to correct something that was wrong, a group of people that were wronged and their descendants, as opposed to a blanket like, if you attend here, you get this preference for that particular reason. So just really different. And I think it would be quite easy to ensure that we're talking about legacy admissions and donors and stuff like that. I think that's easy wording.
Got it. Thanks. Yeah, I see the distinction between legacy versus familial status being different. Another question, I don't think that this is, I don't think there's any legal implications here, but in terms of principles, does this raise any questions about sibling preference in the lottery?
I think it would. I mean, if it's a legacy, I don't think it would necessarily. I don't think there would be such a thing as a sibling preference in this case. I think this is trying to avoid any sort of legacy emissions. I think that would generally go more
generational?
towards, yeah. But this, as you see here in paragraph 2 of section 2, this talks about eliminating any familial relationships to alumni of the institution. Now that could be read that it just applies to parents. I would think alumni would also apply to brothers and sisters as well, because that's a familial relationship. So my read of the, at least the current draft of the bill, which I'm open to discussing, would be that there is no preference for anymore for siblings that went there as well, because we're trying to look at, the merit of these students getting in, the challenges they've overcome, not the fact that their brother went to the school. And again, I'm open to looking at that. I feel less strongly about a sibling issue than I would for parents who can influence it generationally. But right now it appears, at least from this draft of the legislation, that it's talking about any familial relationship.
One last question from me is there currently a sponsor to this bill, or still to be determined?
Well, I'm glad to sponsor it. I'd be glad to co-sponsor it with others who support
I'm
it.
sorry, I mean at the council.
No, it has not been introduced yet. I know they have, they were shopping it by members. I don't want to get ahead of them in terms of which members they were shopping it through, but I can be glad to talk to you offline about that. But it hasn't been introduced yet, to my knowledge. So I think they were looking at trying to do it. It's quite a contentious budget process right now. I think they were looking to focus on new introductions after the budget process. So this wouldn't be specifically endorsing the bill. And I'm glad to take the lead in terms of, if the committee endorses moving forward with this, of working with committee members just to turn this into a resolution from this bill. I think what we'd want to do would be to endorse the principles we've talked about today in this, but not necessarily call out a specific bill, just express support for the issue. And that would probably give them, the council, momentum to move legislation if they choose.
So Kathleen, at this point, we could move ahead with having a resolution, and then once we have a resolution to consider, then we would vote that out of committee. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
One
Chair
more question for you, Eric,
Yes.
is what? So I had heard that in other states that have done this, it's only been for the public institution that they've regulated something like this, not for the private ones. If not, just because it is very difficult to do so, but it seems like what council is actually considering is this goes beyond UDC, right?
Yeah.
And we know that there is a clear pathway to do that.
Yes. So for us on the state board, there's a clear pathway, because we would be passing a resolution endorsing the end of the preference. I think the council has to wrestle with broader legal concerns with that, whether they can mandate, like, let's say, a Georgetown or a GW or American to end those preferences through legislation. I mean, I think there's some questions back and forth on that, but what we would be doing in our resolution is endorsing an end to that, whichever way it comes, whether it comes by statute, whether it comes by, the university voluntarily doing it. So we would just be endorsing the principle of an end to legacy admissions, not necessarily
Not a particular action or legislation.
a specific bill. It could be voluntary, it could be the council moves a bill. But I think we're trying to make a strong statement about the principle of this, particularly given the Supreme Court's action that would discourage and limit other children from getting an opportunity if they have to compete against students with a legacy advantage or a high donor advantage from one of the family members.
It does seem like the bill is anticipating some of those questions as it pertains to like the tax status of private institutions. So
Yeah, yeah, I think they're trying to figure out ways to legislate it. And unfortunately, since we're just doing a resolution, I mean, I guess fortunately or unfortunately, it would be nice if we had the power to mandate this, but we just do resolutions that endorse the issue. So, in this case, we wouldn't be able to do that mandate, but the legislation does look like it's contemplating ways to try to mandate that they end legacy preferences.
all right, if there aren't, go ahead, Eric.
So Chair Henderson, would the best way to proceed then, since it seems like the committee is in support of the idea, we weren't sure, if the committee would be or not. Now that we know there's support for the committee, I'm glad to work with the assigned staff to turn this into a formal resolution, which would then come back to the committee, and then the committee would then take it up. And I think since the issue's already been referred to committee, I assume the resolution doesn't need to be discussed at a further working session. It would just come back then to the committee. I'm not sure how this works under the new bylaws. Kathleen, we can always, I guess, look into that, later if we need to. But what would you recommend on it?
Yeah, so I would recommend if you could start working on a draft, that would
Okay.
be great. I will be out of office all next week. But I will be back the following Tuesday on the 4th. So I don't know if next week you want to try to start putting something together.
Yeah,
I
I'd
can
love
look
to.
at it when I come back.
Yeah, when would our working session be that we could then, if it does it need to go back to a working session again, the draft, or do we just
It
go
needs to
right
go
back to
to
committee for a vote?
the committee, and then
Okay.
after the committee says, like, would vote in sort of support of moving the resolution.
Okay, so the timeline
on
would
there.
be then we get the resolution written up in time for Chair Henderson's next committee
Yes,
meeting. Okay,
yes.
Yeah, and then we would bring it back to the working session. And then after the working session, it would go to the SAC. Although
Oh, well, if they're in
it
session.
could be, yeah, it could be that it won't go to the SAC because we don't have a SAC convened for July. If that's when it works out.
does it need another working session after the committee moves it out? I didn't know that it did.
I think a draft resolution needs to come to the working session.
Yeah, so
Okay,
the bylaws, well, the SOPs contradict each other a little bit on this. But in the process for moving a resolution through committee, it doesn't talk about going to the working session after that, but the bylaws do explicitly say that any resolution has to be presented at the working session immediately preceding when it's voted on.
okay,
So I would assume just might as well, because we usually have our committee meetings at the end of the month. And so there will be a working session between then and the next meeting anyway.
okay, great. So
Yeah.
before I stop wasting all of your time as you try to get to the holiday weekend here, let me just make my notes then. So Kathleen, when is the next committee meeting?
It is on June 28th.
June 28th. Okay, so the goal would be to have that June 28th and then present at the July meeting of the
The working
Working
session
session.
the next week. Yeah.
working session. And then I'm still remaining
Yeah.
hopeful that we
And
have a vote in July.
ideally I think the meetings go more smoothly if, like, prior to the committee meeting, the
We get the
committee gets
draft
the
out.
draft, and then we
Yes.
just have like any issues or things that can be discussed happen during the meeting.
How about I strive for 2 weeks in terms of turning it around and getting it, I'll get it to staff maybe within the next 10 days. And
Yeah,
then,
that sounds good.
and then we make sure that the committee chair and committee members get it with 2 weeks to review it, if that works.
That would be great.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, the bylaws say 7 business days for the committee to review it, so that would be about a week and a half.
Okay, all right, great. That sounds perfect. Anything further that you need, Chair Henderson or representatives? If not, then I will
Yep.
depart your meeting and I wish you all a happy holiday.
Great, thank you. Thanks for coming and
All right, thank
presenting.
you for having me.
All right, we will proceed with graduation requirements. At the last meeting, we discussed some of the things that we wanted to know about what the existing requirements were and what the sources were, if any of them were federally required, if any were required by DC code. And Kathleen has done some research on those questions, so I'm going to ask Kathleen to report on what she found out.
Yes, okay. So for the first question around national graduation requirements, there are not, the only national graduation requirements are for schools controlled by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, so we don't really need to worry about that in our situation. In general, grad requirements are set at the state level, but there are a couple states that defer that authority to the local level. In terms of requirements legislated in the DC code, there are not really any. There is a part of the DC code that mandates the mayor to ensure each student takes the SAT or ACT before graduating, and applies to at least one post-secondary institution, but that is not in our actual graduation requirements. And it doesn't, the legislation is like the subject of it, or the object of it is the mayor, and so it isn't anything sort of binding for schools or students at this point in time. And then the other thing is, in the Healthy Schools Act, there's provision that says in grades 9 to 12, students need instruction in CPR that shall be included in at least one health class necessary for graduation, which implies there is at least one health class necessary for graduation. But other than that, there's just a couple of things around like not unduly hindering people completing their requirements. In terms of like the interstate military compact, like for exclusionary discipline and things like that. And the only proposed one that we have right now is the bill that we discussed previously that would require completion of the FAFSA. And I think those were the questions that were asked last time, but I don't know if there are any other questions that you all think would be important to have the answers to before moving forward.
Thank you, Kathleen. Representative Chang, do you have any questions?
Not at this time.
I just noticed you were off mute, so wanted to check.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Kathleen. I think that's helpful starting ground. Another bit of context on this, we had also tried to get a little more information from Aussie about what their timeline is on the work that they're doing. Dr. Grant did mention it in her remarks at the last SBOE public meeting, and they might give us more update at the June working session on that, but generally we're thinking that they won't be engaging with us in great detail until next year on those. But I would like for us to go ahead and start engaging the community about grad requirements. And so I'm interested in what other committee members think would be helpful in terms of engaging people who we want to reach out to and how we'd like to do that. And one thing I'm wondering is kind of at what level we want to do outreach, whether we want to do that as a committee doing citywide outreach, or if we want to do ward specific outreach or focus groups, or any thoughts about how we approach that?
Rep. Henderson, I'm sorry. The goal is, one more time, for the outreach is what?
To get input on any revisions that we should make to graduation requirements, or the broader question is, what do we hope our students will know and be able to do when they graduate?
Just throwing out a few stakeholders first, right? Because I think we should target the people who care the most, and will have the strongest direct connection to this topic, right? I mean, certainly students, parents, teachers, but perhaps also local businesses. Does anyone else come to mind?
Would you think, out of school leadership, who do you think would be most, like, would it be principals, or would it be like college counselors or career counselors, or maybe
Yeah,
both?
interesting. Yeah, I mean, for them, the challenge for us always is, we may theoreticize that they have it affects them, and it certainly does, but with everything else on their plate, I actually think the question for us is, how do we frame this as a topic that's interesting enough for them to come and just provide feedback on, given that we don't have any particular ask yet, right? In terms of where necessarily it goes in the short term and how it'll affect them in the short term. So it does feel like an ask for, please help us think this through, rather than a public engagement piece as of yet. But and I wonder then if it's this is just me thinking out loud here, Rep. Anderson, but I wonder if it's actually more of a, we see if anyone wants to apply to be in a little bit more of an advisory role with us, or kind of be on this journey with us as we sort this out. But I worry that if we just do an engagement event, we won't get much engagement without outside of our immediate personal networks of asks, which I think is the other way, right? We have this event, and everyone on this committee is tasked with bringing in one of each of these stakeholders, perhaps.
Yeah, I was thinking more along those lines than like an open call, more that we would kind of reach out to people. I like the idea of including employers. That's also like a huge category. Are there?
Yeah.
If you could help me kind of think through like how how to narrow that down, or are there people who
Kathleen, do we know what the #1 employer for DC public school grads is?
Not off the top of my head, but I feel like that's a question for the upcoming what is it, P20, I can't remember what it's called, the thing that DME is doing where they're tracking student post-grad outcomes.
That thing.
But the I can't remember what it's called. But the DME does do things on like workforce entry and like supporting a kind of like career development through one of their offices. So we might be able to ask them if they know, or DOES.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, you see where my mind is going with it, right? Like,
Mhm.
what else can we, who has the biggest, who already thinks of this as a problem that we can engage,
Mhm.
or a question that's top of mind that we can engage.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I know, like, in my past, it's been school leaders who have brought this to me. So I know that they have some interest. I think you're absolutely right that employers would have interest. So I think next steps, maybe I will work with Kathleen to kind of narrow down a more concrete proposal for a kind of targeted gathering of stakeholders that the rest of the committee can kind of react to.
Yep.
But that input is helpful in how we would um, design that proposal.
Cool.
So thank you. Um, does that sound good, Kathleen, to move forward that way? Anything
Yeah.
else, Representative Patterson, on that?
No, Mr. Chair, I'm good.
Okay.
I guess just one more question. Are we, for this like more targeted group, are we thinking of it as something that the committee would do, or that we might want to have like hire or like contract someone to hold a focus group, or are we not sure?
I think we're not sure, but I feel like we could do that. But let's keep that in mind
I agree.
as we work forward. All right, so next up, literacy updates. Representative Chang, we'd love to get from you just kind of where we are on the
Mhm.
budget advocacy that you've been doing,
Yep.
that we've been trying to support. If you could.
Yeah, thank you. So, final stretch here. The NCTQ helped me put a letter together that they're sending to the chairman for this final stretch. And it provides more citations for why coaching from other states has been actually the most important thing to invest in, and really advocates for why all these pieces need to come together, not just be invested in piecemeal. So once I get the forwarded copy of that, I would really appreciate your help to share it with your council members and our at-large council members. And I also just emailed you all a draft of what OSCE/schools would monitor and evaluate during this first phase rollout, and would also appreciate your feedback on that. I would say by end of day today is sort of the deadline that I was asked to think this through, but that's in 13 minutes. So I think by midnight maybe would be helpful, and I'll see what I can do to make sure that that's incorporated.
And what's the relationship of that to the budget?
So it'll all go in the BSA with the language, and so I think it's all tied, right? The budget ask is tied to the legislation.
All right, thank you. And if so, however the budget pans out, do you have kind of next steps for us around
I,
literacy?
I appreciate that. I think the next step would be that, and I would love to propose another convening from this committee as well, with some of the literacy stakeholders. I think regardless of how far we get with these asks, to propose not only spending some of our time as a committee, but also some of our budget as a committee to convene a gathering of educators, school leaders, a very similar group of folks that we had just named, Representative Henderson, and but perhaps instead of businesses, right, bringing in actually some literacy funders. I don't know how far off we're going to be in this final budget of what's left that we still need to fill as a gap to make sure that this first year is implemented in a way that is supportive of teachers to make this transition. But I think, anything that we could be doing to bring these actors together to make the most of this opportunity that we have would be, I think, very helpful to move the work forward. And so I think the goal then would be, right, and it's my assumption that this will all focus on kindergarten. So really hone in on kindergarten, inviting kindergarten instructors, principals of elementary schools, some local funders and other actors that are also invested in this work.
And would you be open to the committee kind of proposing this to the broader board and making it a board event? Like we would
Yes,
kind of
very much so.
Okay. And so I think maybe Kathleen, if this makes sense, it would be Representative Chang working with you on kind of making a concrete proposal to bring to the full board.
Yes, so, well, if you were trying to do that by the next working session, I will not be able to help you. But if you wanted to do something by the following working session,
I think that's more accurate. I don't, because we
okay.
won't know what the
I
what's
just
in the
am not gonna
final.
be in office for like 7 of the 10 business days between now and then. Yes, and I think we should also have a committee meeting between. So we want to bring the proposal to the committee for like that feedback first before it goes to the full board. That might also be helpful to just get like other opinions and feedback.
Yeah, great.
And when is the ideal time for this to happen? Is it like before the school year starts, or?
I think it's right around that, right? Because if it's too soon, some of our stakeholders would be away. If it's too late, it'll, right. So I know there's a lot going on right as school starts. And so, and Kathleen, the staff is all on vacation in August. Is that right?
Not like the whole time in August, but we're not.
Mm-hmm.
I guess this is also still a question for you guys if you decide you want to move the meetings, but we like, it's not like we're not in the office during the whole month, but we just don't have the like as much of the public facing stuff happening.
Yeah.
right, so
Well, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'm just gonna say, I mean, I think Representative Patterson, are you supportive of this effort? Okay, yeah, I think the committee is good to, support you in moving this forward and trying to make it happen.
Thank you. Appreciate that a lot. And I will work with Kathleen on it. Kathleen, I think I'd love your take on whether it's August or September or October, but if you could chew on that and let me know what you think would be best. I am going to forward all of our colleagues actually this letter from NCTQ. They were originally scheduling it for Monday, Tuesday, but once I heard that the sort of deadline was a little sooner, they sent it out this afternoon. And so knowing that deadline is looming, I'd love your help to forward this today if possible.
All right, thank you. So we have two more items, not so lengthy. First is an update on the math work. We are proceeding with a math panel for June. Kathleen, do you have updates on where that panel stands?
Yes, so we are in a great place with the panel, which was my goal before being out of town for a week. So we have our 5 actually this month panelists. David Barnes, who is the Associate Executive Director for the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics. Josh Boots, the Executive Director of Empower K-12, who's also sort of one of the leaders of the Math Hub. Kayla Green, who's a math teacher from Hart Middle School and was a finalist for the DC Math Teacher of the Year last year. Dana Grosser Clarkson, who's a master teacher and senior lecturer in secondary mathematics at UMD. And Tiffany Williams, who's the managing director of STEM at KIPP DC. So we have sort of a number of different perspectives: teachers, admin, we have teacher prep, sort of professional organization, and then I guess nonprofit or other involved groups. So yeah, I mean, we're good to go.
Okay, yeah, that's great. I'm glad all of those people accepted. Representative Best was, I checked in with him because he's the one who brought the resolution to the committee. He wants to kind of wait and see what comes out of the panel to see how we proceed on that. So I'm looking forward to that. I've talked to a few of those folks in the past, and I'm excited to hear from them at the panel. Any other thoughts, questions, comments about the math panel? All right. Representative Best is planning to reach out to agencies in the next week or two, but he asked if I would ask you all if there are specific people that you would suggest that he talk to. And if no one comes to mind, but they do come to mind later, feel free to either directly tell Representative Best, or you can pass those on to me and I can relay them to him.
Mr. Chair, when you say talk to, what is, can you clarify that a little bit to me in suggesting who he should talk to on the council? What do you mean?
I think he mentioned agencies, so I think he's zeroing in on DME, OSSI, and DCPS, I believe. So start there, but I think he's open to anybody else who you think
Okay.
would be worthwhile to connect with on the issue.
Yeah,
I think
because,
this is in response to sort of last month,
uh-huh,
us saying there needed to be some of that internal discussion before proposing like,
right.
the, task force.
And thank you for that clarification, because I want to make sure that the process is right and the people who need to be buy in early, whether they're at OSSI or some other agency and stuff like that. So I'll think of some people that he should definitely reach out to so that it doesn't come blindsiding them and they become opposed before they even hear about it. And I'll definitely forward some names to him.
Yeah, thanks. So, again, after last month, we, sorry, I forgot that a lot of this transpired kind of between meetings, but after the last meeting, we kind of regrouped and narrowed down the AI resolution and kind of split it into two phases. So the first one being just a general resolution that we passed about, we need to pay attention to this, and kind of waiting on the second part of, whether we want to do a task force or something like that, so that we can get that buy-in and engage people ahead of time. So that's what we're trying to get done before a next resolution that has more concrete proposals, but that are done in collaboration with these other agencies. And I'll ask if there's any other new business.
Thank you, Rep. Henderson, for keeping us on time.
Sure, yeah.
That's what I was about to say. Thank you. Timely, efficient.
So we all have a few, well, I know I do, and Representative Chang has some follow-ups. And
I'll send out,
Notes.
follow-ups and the, YouTube link later this, hopefully in the next like hour or so.
Okay.
And then there is always the notes are in SharePoint if you want to go see the like more detailed ones. They're in like the committee folder under our name. But I will make sure to send out the action items from today before I leave.
all right. Thank you, Kathleen. Thank you, Karuna, and thank you, members, for the meeting. And I wish you all a very wonderful weekend, and we'll see you at the working session.
You
Thank
as
you.
well. Thank you.
All the same.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.